Hi, everyone. Welcome to our preview episode for GeoChat, the podcast of the Department of Geosciences at Virginia Tech. I will be your podcast host. My name is Rose McGroarty. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Geosciences, and I'm the face behind much of the social media content that you see on our Facebook, Instagram, and X accounts. So I'm very excited to be doing this podcast, and I will be starting to send the official recordings out next week. But this is just a little preview to talk about what the podcast is going to be and talk a little bit about the scientific method, just for the benefit and just for fun to talk about with all of our audience here. So, what we will be doing is we will be interviewing recent authors in our department, grad students and faculty who have published papers recently, and we'll be asking them to talk about their papers and giving them some Q&A and hearing what they have to say about their science. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited for doing this. But this week, I wanted to talk to you about the process of the scientific method and publishing a scientific paper, because we're talking about recently published papers, and I think this is going to be very helpful for us to talk about before we get into the podcast episodes. We've already recorded the first episode. I'm very excited to release it. I'm going to give you this preview now. And also, yes, I know we don't have a mic, we don't have a pop filter. Those have been ordered. I'm very excited for them to arrive, so please bear with us while we're still getting all of our technical details sorted out, and things are just going to get better from here. And so let's talk about the scientific method. So the scientific method, I think a lot of us are familiar with it already, but this is where we have a question and we make a hypothesis and we say, well, I wonder if the answer to the question is this. And then we come up with some kind of experiment to test it or to research it. And I'm being a little bit vague here because geoscience is a very broad field. We have paleontologists, we have geochemists, we have geophysicists, we have data scientists who study radar taken from satellites orbiting the Earth. We have people who are using GPS and doing modeling. We have people modeling mantle processes. We have people who are studying other planets. We have so much research, and I'm not even mentioning all of the research here. There's so much in our one department. So I'm being a little bit vague here when I talk about the scientific method. I'm speaking very broadly, very generally, and we'll talk more about specifics when I speak with individual authors. But I just wanted to talk about what this is. So we have this method, and we say maybe it's going to be doing lab-based modeling. Maybe it's computer modeling. Maybe we're doing lab experiments. Maybe we're going out to the field and we're collecting data in the field. Whatever we might be doing, we're going to say, what do I need to get the answer to my question? And then we process the data, we analyze the results, we look at the field results, the lab results, maybe some combination of both, and we decide what are we finding out here. We probably shouldn't say decide, but we think about that and we say, okay, well what is this telling me? What am I learning from this? And then we write about it and we share it. And I think a lot of us are familiar with that process. I am going to talk also about the paper publication process because I think that's a little bit more out there. It's not really something I knew anything about, at least until I was in college, and even more when I was in grad school. So let's talk about what happens. We've already done the research. We have the answer to our question. Now what? Because it's great. Okay, I know the answer to my question, but what if someone else has the same question? What if this is something that could be very helpful to other people, but they don't know me personally? There's no way to really talk about it. So we're going to talk about papers. What I can do is I can write a paper about it. And the length of the paper is long enough. I know that's a little vague. Again, very broad field here. So how long does the paper need to be? It needs to tell the story. It needs to say what's the background to the problem, what's the problem, what did I do to try and find the answer to the problem, and what are the results. And that might be 2 pages. That might be 22 pages. It's going to be long enough without being so long, without being too long, without being rambling the way I'm doing right now in our podcast. So I'll write that up. I will send it to a journal. The journal, we have a lot of great journals in our field. There are some general geoscience journals. There are some very specific, subfield specific journals. So you might be sending one to a geophysics journal. You might be sending one to a paleontology journal, depending on what your research is. And then they will decide, is this within the scope of our journal? Is this appropriate for us to publish in our journal? That's their first question. Because if someone sends a geophysics paper to a paleontology journal, the paleontology journal will rightfully say, this does not belong here, and they'll reject it outright, as they should. It doesn't belong there. So let's say that the journal says, this is great research. This is groundbreaking. So they want to know, is it relevant? Is it a question that's in the field right now? Is it a question that people want to know the answers to? Is this new? Is this something that everybody knows, but maybe has kind of a general knowledge, but nobody's ever really tested? It's an assumption that we're testing. Is this brand new knowledge that no one has ever known before? That's the sort of questions they'll ask. How novel is it? How appropriate is it to publish? And then let's say that they decide that it's appropriate for their journal, that it is of interest to them, it's novel, then we're going to begin the review process. And so what will happen is they will send it out to what we call peer review. And peer review is when people who are in the field but are not associated with the research will review the paper. So this will not be going to the author's colleagues. It will not be going to people who sponsor the research, or people who are also sponsored by the same company who sponsored the research, or organization, National Science Foundation, Exxon, whatever, whoever may be sponsoring the research. It will not be reviewed by anyone who's associated or affiliated with them. And what they will do is they will decide, is this sound? Is this valid? And they'll read it through and they'll say, okay, I like the question. This is great. Oh, the methods. And they might have some questions about the methods. They might have a suggestion and they might say you should go back and you should repeat this experiment during XYZ. They might tell you you should collect field data using these parameters. They might tell you that you should do something different with your processing. They might tell you it looks great as it is, or they might say, it's a little vague, you should add in some more background information. So there's lots of different advice that they may give you. And they might suggest to reject the paper because it's not scientifically sound. They might suggest to reject it because it's not novel, it's just not interesting enough to publish. Not everything can get published. It might be something that they accept pending minor revisions. It might be something they accept pending major revisions. Whatever it might be, that feedback is given back to the authors. And this is anonymous feedback. So, reviewer one said this, reviewer two said that. If you're in the field, you know the whole joke about reviewer two. That's like a whole meme. I won't get into that right now. Maybe there's a reviewer three, and depending on your journal. And so you get the individual feedback, but it's anonymous. And that helps protect the integrity of the peer review process. And then you make whatever revisions are necessary. You do whatever experiment they recommended, whatever modifications to your data acquisition they recommended, or if that's impossible, you document why, and maybe that's a follow-up question. And then you send it back to be reviewed again. And then hopefully they will accept it. It might be rejected or it might be accepted. And then if it's accepted, there might still be minor revisions. So you might need to, reformat your bibliography, for example, but then it may be accepted from that point on. Once it's accepted, at some point it will be published. How long it will take will depend on the journal. Some journals will publish it online before they put it into print. And so you can access it online, but it's not in print. So I actually have a lab mate whose paper has been accepted. It will be available online. And then later, and I think maybe October or November, it will be published in the print journal. So it's accessible right now. It's approved, it's accepted, it's on the website, and you can access it right now. But it's going to have a publication date of October or November. So sometimes there can be a little something weird about that with logistics. But that is the process of how we go from a research question to a solution, and also how the papers go through the review process. And I think that's very important because there's a lot of question, and we should have a lot of questions. We should question the science. We should say, why is this valid? Why should I trust this? Why should I trust this? Should always be the question that we ask whenever we read a paper or hear about new research. I think it's also very important that we understand that there is a very rigorous process for going through this. So I'm not saying blindly trust the science. I would never say that. I don't think that's appropriate to say. But I hope that this is helpful for people who are just starting to get into this entire world of reading research papers and hearing about research papers and learning about current research. Hopefully this is helpful. It's always great to ask questions and to think about these, and that's what we're going to be doing this podcast for, so that we can do that. But hopefully this little preview is helpful, so that when we say here's a recently published paper, you understand what's been happening with the paper leading up to the point where it's been published. So I'm very excited to be dropping our first episode next Thursday. So today is August 15th. So I'm going to be posting our first episode on Thursday, August 21st. So 2025. So keep an eye out for that on our department YouTube, and I'll be posting it to our other socials. And I'm really excited. Drop comments. Let me know if you have any questions. If you are just curious about anything, we always love to hear from you. And in the meantime, I just want to thank you all so much for being the awesome audience that you have been on social media up till now. And we're going to have so much fun with this podcast. And I'm really just looking forward to going through all of this research that's happening in our department, that has just been happening, is currently happening. And I'm so excited to share it with you guys. So please keep in touch and let's do something awesome together. Thank you guys, and stay lava.